The Crucible space station floated silently in the darkness between stars, its metallic surface gleaming under distant starlight. For 300 years, it had served one purpose: to train the toughest candidates from across the galaxy in extreme survival. This was where heroes were made, where the weak failed, and where only the strongest proved they could face the universe's harshest conditions. Inside the massive observation deck, Instructor Veldar watched the latest group of arrivals through his crystalline eyes. He was a Zentarii, a being whose body looked like living crystal, sharp and glowing with an inner light. He had trained thousands of students over his long life, and he could usually tell within minutes who would succeed and who would quit. Today's group included 23 candidates from 17 different alien species. There were the Krilt warriors with their 4 powerful arms and thick armor like shells. There were the insectoid Tikri with their compound eyes that could see in multiple directions at once. There were beings of all shapes and sizes, each one the best their planet had to offer. And then there were the 3 humans. Veldar studied them with curiosity. They had just stepped out of their transport ship, looking around the station with wide eyes. They seemed so ordinary, so fragile. The first was a tall man with dark skin and short hair who moved like a soldier. The second was a woman with brown skin and long braided hair who carried a small pack on her back. The third was a shorter, stocky man with pale skin and light hair who was smiling like he was arriving at a vacation resort instead of the galaxy's toughest training facility. "Those are the humans?" Veldar asked his assistant, Tiklier, who was busy organizing data on her computer screen. "Yes, Instructor," she replied, her mandibles clicking together as she spoke. "They come from a planet called Earth. It was recently added to the Concordance. Their planet's full classification is still being processed." Veldar looked at the humans again. They had no natural armor. No claws or fangs. No thick skin or protective shells. They looked soft and vulnerable compared to everyone else. He wondered if they would even survive the first day. In the main assembly hall, all 23 candidates stood in neat rows. The room was enormous, with high ceilings and walls covered in screens showing various deadly environments from across the galaxy. Veldar stood at the front, his crystalline body reflecting the harsh lights. "Welcome to the Crucible," he began, his voice echoing through the hall. "You are here because your worlds believe you are the best. You are here because you think you can handle anything. Let me be clear. Most of you will pass this course. But some of you will fail. Some of you will quit. And that is acceptable. It is better to know your limits here than to die in the real void of space." The candidates stood at attention, listening carefully. Among them, the Krilt warrior named Jakor flexed his 4 muscular arms. He was covered in battle scars and wore medals from military campaigns. He had conquered enemies on 3 different planets. He looked at the 3 humans standing nearby and felt something like pity. They would not last long. "The training has 5 main parts," Veldar continued, making images appear in the air above him. "First, you will face extreme temperatures, both freezing cold and burning heat. Second, you will survive in atmospheres very different from your home air. Third, you will endure crushing gravity much stronger than what you are used to. Fourth, you will navigate environments filled with poison and toxic substances. Fifth, you will learn to find food in places where nothing seems edible." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Each test is designed to push you to exactly 70% of what would kill you. You will be in pain. You will be afraid. You will want to quit. But you will not die. We are harsh here, but we are not murderers." Behind Jakor, he heard the stocky human whisper to his friends, "This actually sounds pretty fun." Fun. Jakor's mandibles spread wide in what his species considered a sneer. These humans had no idea what real suffering felt like. They would learn soon enough. He gave them 2 days before they quit and went home crying. After the assembly, Veldar returned to his private office and pulled up the files on the 3 humans. The tall one was named Thomas Blake, a former soldier. The woman was Grace Palmer, some kind of wilderness teacher. The stocky one was Jack Morrison, who did rescue work in cold places. But it was the information about their home planet that made Veldar pause. Earth's atmosphere contained 21% oxygen. That was incredibly high. Most species breathed air with only 12 to 15% oxygen. Anything above 18% was considered dangerous. Then there was the gravity reading, 1.0 standard units. Veldar checked it twice, thinking there must be an error. That was one of the highest gravity levels for any inhabited planet in the entire Concordance. Most species evolved on worlds with only 60 to 80% of that gravity. And the temperature data looked corrupted. It showed Earth's surface ranging from -89 degrees to +57 degrees Celsius. No stable planet fluctuated that much naturally. "Tiklier," he called to his assistant. Is this Earth data corrupted or accurate? She scuttled over on her 6 legs and examined the screen. It appears accurate, instructor. I checked it against 3 different databases. Veldar felt an unusual sensation run through his crystalline structure. Unease perhaps. Or the beginning of understanding. Keep very close watch on these humans during training, he said quietly. I suspect there is much more to them than appearances suggest. In the candidate quarters, the 3 humans were unpacking their bags and settling into their small rooms. They seemed completely relaxed, joking with each other and making plans. Think they'll start with heat or cold first? Jack asked, hanging up his spare clothes. Grace shrugged while organizing her gear. Does it matter? Neither one is going to be that bad. Thomas smiled slightly. Just remember we're supposed to be normal here. Try not to show off too much on the first day. They all laughed at that, not knowing that in the observation room above Veldar was watching them on the security cameras, wondering what kind of world could produce creatures that looked so harmless yet came with such alarming biological data. The training would begin tomorrow. And nothing would ever be quite the same at the Crucible again. The morning alarm echoed through the Crucible station, waking all 23 candidates for their first day of real training. They gathered in the preparation room outside the thermal regulation chambers, where the temperature test would take place. The room buzzed with nervous energy as students checked their equipment one final time. Most candidates wore thick environmental suits that looked like armored spacesuits. These suits had built-in heating and cooling systems, oxygen supplies, and multiple layers of protection. The technology was expensive and sophisticated, designed to keep the wearer alive in conditions that would normally kill them within minutes. The 3 humans walked in wearing simple jackets, pants, and boots. Nothing special. Nothing high-tech. Just regular clothes that looked like they came from an ordinary store. Ticklyer, the insectoid assistant instructor, stared at them with her compound eyes. Her mandibles clicked together in confusion. Where are your environmental suits? She asked. Thomas looked down at his jacket. This is our gear. But the chamber reaches -40 degrees Celsius. You will freeze to death. Grace smiled politely. We'll be fine, thank you. Across the room, Jacor the Krilt warrior laughed loudly, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. His 4 arms crossed over his armored chest as he looked at the humans with obvious contempt. You soft skins will last maybe 10 minutes before your blood turns to ice. I have seen tougher creatures than you die in light frost. Jack just grinned at him. Want to make a bet on that? The massive chamber doors opened with a hiss of pressurized air. Inside was a vast room that could simulate almost any temperature found in the known galaxy. The walls were lined with cooling systems that could drop the temperature faster than falling into a frozen lake. Veldar's voice came through the speakers. Candidates, enter the chamber. We will begin at -20 degrees Celsius and decrease gradually. Stay as long as you can. When you cannot continue, press your emergency button and you will be extracted. There is no shame in admitting your limits. The candidates filed inside. The door sealed behind them with a heavy thunk. Immediately, the temperature began to drop. The walls turned white with frost. Ice crystals formed in the air, making everyone's breath visible. In the control room, Veldar watched multiple screens showing vital signs for each candidate. Heart rates, body temperatures, stress levels. Every suit sent constant data back to ensure no one actually died during training. The temperature hit -20 degrees. Most candidates shifted uncomfortably inside their suits, but the heating elements were working hard, keeping them safe. Their vital signs showed stress but nothing dangerous. The humans' monitors showed mild discomfort. Nothing more. Veldar leaned closer to the screens, his crystalline structure humming with confusion. Increase to -30 degrees, he ordered. The temperature dropped further. Now it was cold enough that exposed skin would freeze in minutes. Several candidates' suits began emitting warning beeps as their heating systems worked at maximum capacity. Through the viewing window, Veldar could see some students hopping from foot to foot, trying to stay warm despite their protective gear. The humans were standing still, rubbing their arms casually like someone might do on a cool autumn morning. This really isn't that bad, Jack said to his companions, his voice picked up by the chamber's microphones. Remember that winter in Siberia? When we did that rescue training? It was colder than this most mornings. Grace nodded, adjusting her jacket collar. Or that time in northern Canada. We were camping in weather twice as cold as this. Thomas remained quiet, breathing slowly and steadily, his military training evident in how efficiently he conserved energy and heat. In the control room, a medical technician called out nervously. Instructor, the human's body temperatures are dropping, but they're not in danger. Their metabolic systems are compensating naturally. I have never seen physiology like this. Veldar pulled up Earth's climate data on his personal screen. What he saw made his crystalline eyes widen. Earth's recorded temperature range was -89 degrees to +57 degrees Celsius. That was a range of 146 degrees occurring naturally on a single planet. Most inhabited worlds in the concordance varied by perhaps 20 to 30 degrees between their coldest and warmest regions. Earth's temperature swings were 5 times larger. They evolved in this, he whispered. Their biology adapted to handle these extremes without technology. The chamber temperature continued dropping. -35 degrees. -40 degrees. At -42 degrees, Jacor's environmental suit began flashing red warnings. The heating system was failing. His thick exoskeleton was conducting the cold inward, freezing him despite his natural armor. He tried to stay strong to prove Krill's superiority, but his 4 limbs were going numb. Through chattering mandibles, he saw the human named Jack notice his distress. "Hey," Jack called out, walking over easily despite the brutal cold. "You okay there?" Fine," Jacor lied, his pride refusing to admit weakness to a human. "No, you're not. Listen, try tucking your limbs closer to your body's center. See? Like this. It reduces the surface area exposed to the cold. Keeps your core temperature stable. It's an old camping trick." Jacor wanted to refuse, but he was too cold to let pride kill him. He pulled his 4 arms in tighter against his torso, exactly as Jack demonstrated. Within seconds he felt warmer. His suit's warnings decreased. A camping trick. These humans had casual solutions to conditions that required advanced technology for everyone else. By the time the cold phase ended at -45 degrees, 3 candidates had pressed their emergency buttons and been extracted. The humans had barely broken a sweat. When the chamber shifted to the heat phase, reaching 60 degrees Celsius, the pattern repeated. While other candidates' cooling systems worked frantically, the humans simply took off their jackets and rolled up their sleeves. "I've done training exercises in the Sahara Desert," Grace mentioned casually. "In summer. At noon. This is actually more comfortable because there's no sun beating down on you." When the temperature testing finally ended, all candidates filed out exhausted. Their suits had protected them, but the stress of fighting against such extreme conditions had drained them mentally and physically. The humans looked like they had just finished a light workout. In the observation area, Asichlik, another Tikri student, approached the humans with scientific curiosity. "How is this possible? Your species has no natural armor, no thick fat layers, no obvious cold weather adaptations." Thomas thought about how to explain. "Our bodies are very good at regulating temperature. We sweat to cool down and shiver to warm up. Our blood vessels expand and contract to control heat loss. We evolved to survive in lots of different climates." "But why would you need such abilities?" Grace answered simply. "Because on Earth, you might experience summer heat and winter cold in the same location just 6 months apart. You adapt or you die." Jacor approached slowly, his pride wounded but his respect growing. "You helped me in there, human Jack. I was taught that Krilt are the strongest warriors in the galaxy. But you treated conditions that nearly killed me like a normal day." Jack shrugged with an easy smile. "Different worlds, different normal. No shame in that." But as the candidates dispersed to rest before the next day's challenges, word spread quickly through the station. The soft-looking humans from the unknown planet were not what they appeared. And everyone was beginning to wonder what kind of terrifying world could produce such creatures. Veldar updated his report with a single new line: "Earth classification status. Urgent review required." 3 days after the temperature trials, the candidates gathered in a different kind of chamber. This one looked less like a testing facility and more like a strange alien forest. Plants with odd shapes and unusual colors grew from the floor. Fungi clustered on artificial logs. Strange fruits hung from manufactured trees. The air smelled earthy and slightly sweet, with undertones of something chemical. This was the emergency nutrition module, and it terrified most species more than the temperature extremes. The rules were simple but harsh. Survive for 3 days eating only what you could find in this room. No outside food. No supplements. Choose wrong and you would spend those 3 days violently ill in the medical bay. Veldar stood at the entrance, his crystalline body reflecting the artificial sunlight. Inside this chamber are plants and fungi from 12 different worlds. Some are nutritious. Some will make you sick. Some will kill you if you eat enough. Your scanners will help identify basic chemistry, But ultimately you must decide what is safe. You have 3 days. Good luck. The candidates entered nervously. Most species in the galaxy had very specific dietary needs. Their bodies evolved to process certain foods and nothing else. Even a 10% deviation from their normal diet could cause serious illness or death. The margin for error was tiny. Jacques moved carefully through the chamber, his scanner held in one of his 4 hands. He spent nearly 2 hours analyzing a single root vegetable, checking its chemical composition against his species database. Finally, satisfied it would not kill him, he took one small bite and waited an hour to see if he would get sick. This was how he would spend the next 3 days, eating tiny portions of verified safe foods, always hungry, always cautious. Ishlik the Tikri had an even harder time. Her species required very specific nutrients found only on her homeworld. She had brought emergency supplements, which the instructors allowed since without them she would certainly die. She could barely eat anything in the chamber at all. Then there were the humans. Grace walked through the artificial forest like she was shopping at a farmer's market, picking up plants and examining them with casual interest. "Oh, these look similar to nightshades," she said, holding up some dark purple berries. "See the leaf pattern here, Thomas? And the way the stem connects? Probably contains some alkaloids, but nothing dangerous if we prepare them right." Thomas picked up a thick, tuberous root and cut it open with his knife. The inside was white and starchy. "This reminds me of cassava. Might have cyanogenic compounds, but we can process those out." Across the chamber, several candidates stopped what they were doing to stare. Ishlik moved closer, her translator device working to catch their conversation. "Did you say cyanogenic?" she asked, her mandibles clicking with alarm. "Yes, cyanide precursors," Grace explained, still examining the root. "Pretty common in tubers back on Earth. You just have to soak them and cook them properly to break down the toxins." In the control room, every alarm started going off at once. Medical monitors flashed red. Chemical analysis programs were screaming warnings. A young technician stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Instructor. The humans are planning to consume Class 3 toxins. Multiple types. We need to stop them immediately." Veldar rushed to the screens reading the chemical breakdowns. Cyanide compounds. Solanine alkaloids. Glycoalkaloids. Lectins. These were not just mildly toxic substances. These were serious poisons that appeared in the concordance database with bright red warning labels. He reached for the emergency communication button, ready to order the humans to stop, but something made him pause. They were not eating anything raw. Grace was building a small fire using provided materials. Thomas was setting up a pot with water. Jack was sorting through various plants with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. "My grandmother used to take me mushroom hunting," Jack was saying, holding up a cluster of fungi. "Back in the forest near our village. She taught me that about 40% of mushroom species are safe to eat, 30% will make you sick and 30% will kill you. The trick is knowing which is which." Jakor, who was nearby, backed away slowly. "And you are willing to risk your life on that knowledge?" Jack laughed. "It's not really a risk when you know what to look for. See these gills underneath? And this ring around the stem? And the way it smells earthy but not chemical? Definitely safe. Probably tastes pretty good too." Veldar was pulling up Earth's dietary database, and what he found shocked him more than anything he had seen in 3 centuries of teaching. Humans regularly consumed caffeine, a stimulant compound that most species used as an insecticide. They drank alcohol, literally poisoning themselves for recreation. They ate plants containing capsaicin, a chemical weapon designed by plants to prevent being eaten. They consumed theobromine from cacao seeds, which was toxic to many Earth species but somehow safe for humans. Their liver function was absurdly powerful, able to process and neutralize toxins at rates that seemed impossible. Their digestive systems could break down an enormous variety of organic matter that would kill most other species. "They are not just surviving," Veldar said quietly. "They are thriving." Over the next 3 days, a clear pattern emerged. Most candidates ate sparingly, taking small, careful bites of verified safe foods. They lost weight. Their energy levels dropped. They showed signs of malnutrition despite technically having enough calories. The humans cooked elaborate meals. They boiled the toxic roots, breaking down the poisons into harmless compounds. They roasted the nightshade-like berries, which apparently made them safer and tastier. They prepared the mushrooms in a pan with wild herbs they had identified as safe seasonings. They ate well and often. On the 3rd day, medical checkups showed most candidates had lost between 2 and 5% of their body weight. Perfectly normal for a survival situation. The humans had gained weight. This is medically impossible, the chief medical officer said, staring at the data. They extracted more nutrition from the available materials than the chemistry suggests is possible. Grace explained it simply when asked. Humans are what we call omnivores. We can eat plants, meat, fungi, seeds, roots, fruits, insects. Our bodies evolved to extract nutrition from almost anything organic. We had to because Earth's environments are so different and food sources vary so much. You learn to eat what is available or you starve. By the end of the module, even Jacor's pride could not deny what he was seeing. He approached the three humans as they cleaned their cooking area. Your species is much tougher than you appear, he said. It was the closest thing to an apology the Krilt warrior could manage. Thomas extended his hand, a human gesture of respect that Jacor had learned. The warrior gripped it carefully with one of his 4 hands. We are still soft on the outside, Thomas said with a slight smile. Perhaps, Jacor admitted. But you have earned respect. Sechlik was already writing detailed notes, her scientific mind fascinated by human biology. In the control room, Veldar added another line to his growing report about Earth. Human digestive and detoxification systems operate at levels far beyond concordance standard. Recommend toxicology review of human capabilities. The candidates left the nutrition chamber, but the story of how the humans casually ate poison spread through the station like wildfire. Other students began to look at the 3 soft-skinned creatures with something approaching fear. What kind of nightmare world required its inhabitants to develop immunity to so many toxins just to survive? The answer was becoming increasingly clear and increasingly disturbing. The gravitational stress chamber was the largest room on the Crucible station, and it was the test that most candidates feared above all others. It was a massive spherical space with gravity generators built into every surface, capable of simulating the crushing weight of any planet in the known galaxy. Many students had nightmares about this module before ever setting foot inside. Veldar stood before the assembled candidates, his voice carrying the weight of warning. Gravity is not like temperature or food. You cannot adapt to it quickly. You cannot learn tricks to make it easier. Your bones, your muscles, your heart, your blood, they all evolved for a specific gravity. Push too far beyond that and your own body becomes your enemy. We will start at your homeworld baseline and increase slowly. When you reach your limit you will know. Do not try to be a hero. The first group entered. These were species from light gravity worlds, places where the pull was only 60% of standard measurement. The chamber activated at their baseline, and they moved normally, comfortably. Then the gravity increased to 70% standard. They began to struggle, their movements becoming labored. At 80%, several were on their knees, breathing hard. At 90% standard gravity, 2 candidates pressed their emergency buttons, unable to continue. Their bones were not dense enough for this kind of pressure. The second group fared slightly better. These came from medium gravity worlds around 70 to 80% standard. They managed to reach 1.1 times their homeworld gravity before most had to quit, bodies shaking with effort. Then came Jacor. The Krilt homeworld had heavy gravity, 90% of standard measurement. Jacor was proud of this fact. His species had evolved under crushing weight, developing thick bones and powerful muscles. He entered the chamber confidently, his 4 arms ready. At his baseline he moved easily. At 1.1 times Krilt gravity, he showed strain but continued. At 1.2 times, his movements became slow and deliberate. Every step required concentration. At 1.25 times his homeworld gravity, something in his lower arm made a cracking sound. Not quite a break, but a stress fracture forming under pressure his biology was never meant to handle. The medical team extracted him immediately, his pride wounded worse than his arm. In the observation room, Veldar prepared for the human test with unusual nervousness. He had reviewed Earth specifications multiple times, checking and rechecking the data because he could not quite believe it. Confirm human baseline gravity, he said to his technician. 1.0 standard units, instructor. There was silence in the control room. 1.0 was higher than 83% of all inhabited worlds in the concordance. Only a handful of species evolved under gravity that strong, and all of them looked like Jacor, thick and heavily built with obvious adaptations. The humans looked like they would blow away in a strong wind. Are we certain Earth's data is correct? Veldar asked one more time. Verified through 5 independent sources, instructor. Their homeworld gravity is definitely 1.0 standard units. The 3 humans entered the chamber, talking casually among themselves. The gravity generators activated at Earth baseline. Thomas, Grace and Jack stood normally, completely unbothered. They looked like they were standing in any ordinary room. Feels like home, Grace commented, stretching her arms above her head. In the control room, a young technician from a light-gravity world stared at the monitors in disbelief. They are operating at baseline in conditions that would cripple my entire species. Increase to 1.1 times Earth gravity, Veldar ordered, his voice tight. The humans shifted their weight slightly, adjusting their stance but continued talking normally. Jack did a small jump, testing the increased weight, then nodded to himself. 1.2, Veldar said. Now the humans showed some strain. Their movements became more deliberate. But they were still standing, still mobile, still functional. Grace walked in a circle around the chamber, testing her balance under the increased load. 1.3 times Earth gravity. This was the point where Jakor had suffered a stress fracture. This was weight that should be crushing these soft-bodied creatures into the floor. Jack started doing light exercises. Not intense training, just gentle movements to stay loose. He was sweating, clearly working hard, but he was mobile and alert. From his medical bed in the recovery room, Jakor watched the video feed on the wall screen. His translator device barely captured his whispered words. This is not possible. Thomas noticed the cameras and spoke directly to them, knowing the instructors were watching. Back on Earth, some people run marathons for fun. That is 42 kilometers of running. Some people do it in mountains where the oxygen is thin. We call them ultramarathons. There are races that are even longer. Veldar's crystalline structure hummed with something between awe and fear. He pulled up Earth's complete environmental profile on his main screen and read it aloud for his staff to hear. Earth gravity, 1.0 standard units, among the highest for inhabited worlds. Atmospheric oxygen, 21%, classified as enriched environment with caution advised for most species. Atmospheric pressure variance, extreme, ranging from high-pressure sea level to low-pressure mountain regions where oxygen content drops to 60% of baseline. Temperature range, 146 degrees Celsius variance occurring naturally. Tectonic activity, high with frequent earthquakes and volcanic events. Weather patterns, severe and unpredictable, including hurricanes, tornadoes, and tropical storms. He paused, then read the final line. Preliminary classification, Class 12 Death World. Extreme environmental variability across all major parameters. Not recommended for colonization by most concordant species. Ticklayer stood beside him, her mandibles clicking in the pattern her species used for expressing shock. They come from a death world. Not just any death world, Veldar corrected. A Class 12. That is the highest danger rating in our system. And they evolved there naturally, without technology, without assistance. Everything about their biology is designed to survive conditions that would kill most of us. In the chamber, the gravity test ended. The humans exited, sweating and tired but uninjured. Candidates from other species stared at them with open amazement or fear. Ishlik approached them immediately, her scientific curiosity overwhelming her caution. Your cardiovascular system must be incredibly efficient. Your bones must be remarkably dense. Your muscles must generate extraordinary power relative to your size. This is fascinating. Grace smiled at the enthusiasm. We're just built for Earth. Nothing special. But it was special. Every species in the concordance now understood that these soft-looking humans were anything but weak. They carried their own planet's crushing weight with them everywhere they went. When they walked through normal corridors, they were effectively training in reduced gravity. When they moved, they did so with strength most species could only achieve through powered armor. Jakor requested to speak with Thomas privately. The two met in a quiet corner of the recovery area, the Krilt warrior's arm bandaged but healing. I called you soft skins, Jakor said, his translator making his voice sound humble, an emotion Krilt rarely expressed. I mocked you. I thought my species were the strongest warriors in the galaxy. But you operate in conditions that broke my bones. You do it casually. What kind of world creates beings like you? Thomas considered the question carefully. Earth is not gentle. It has storms that destroy cities. Ground that shakes and splits open. Mountains so high you cannot breathe at the top. Deserts where you die of thirst. Frozen lands where you die of cold. Jungles where everything wants to eat you. The ocean that drowns you. We evolved to handle all of it or we died. Simple as that. Jakor's mandibles spread in what might have been respect. You are terrifying, human Thomas. But I would be honored to fight beside you. The two clasped hands, warrior to warrior, predator to predator, and in that moment a bond formed between species that would change the galaxy's future. In his office, Veldar added another section to his growing report. Humans represent an unprecedented survival profile. All previous assumptions about biological limitations may need revision. The final examination was designed to break even the strongest candidates. It combined every previous test into one brutal week-long survival scenario inside the largest simulation chamber on the Crucible Station. The chamber could recreate entire alien worlds with frightening accuracy, complete with weather patterns, day-night cycles, and environmental hazards that shifted without warning. Veldar gathered all remaining candidates in the briefing room. Over the past weeks, 3 students had already dropped out, unable to handle the stress of the training modules. 20 candidates remained, and they all looked nervous about what was coming. "This is your final test," Veldar announced, his crystalline body reflecting the harsh overhead lights. "You will spend 7 days in an unknown planetary environment. The temperature will fluctuate randomly. The gravity may shift. The atmosphere will change. You will face toxic plants, dangerous terrain, and limited supplies. Most years, candidates barely survive by working together and using everything they have learned. Some years, not everyone finishes." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. "The simulation begins in 1 hour. Gather your minimal gear and prepare yourselves. The galaxy shows no mercy to the unprepared, and neither does this test." The candidates dispersed to collect their equipment. Most took extensive survival packs, medical supplies, breathing apparatus, emergency shelters, and communication devices. They prepared like soldiers going into battle, which in a way they were. The 3 humans packed light bags with basic tools, some rope, a water filter, and fire-starting materials. That was all. Jakor, his arm now healed, watched them with concern. Over the weeks of training, he had developed genuine respect for these humans. "You are taking very little equipment. Are you certain this is wise?" Jack smiled and patted his small backpack. "We have everything we need. Besides, too much gear just weighs you down." The simulation chamber door opened like the mouth of a giant creature, and all 20 candidates entered. The door sealed behind them with a deep, final sound. Immediately the environment activated. They stood in a rocky landscape under a dim orange sky. The air was thin, making breathing difficult. The temperature was cold but not freezing. In the distance, dark clouds promised storms to come. Most candidates immediately began setting up base camps, assembling their high-tech shelters and checking their oxygen supplies. They worked quickly, efficiently, knowing that preparation would determine survival. The humans looked around, assessed the terrain, and Thomas pointed to a rocky outcropping about 200 meters away. "Good shelter there. Natural protection from wind. Possible water runoff. Let's check it out." They walked toward it casually, like they were on a weekend hiking trip instead of fighting for survival on a simulated alien world. By the end of day 1, the temperature had dropped dramatically and a storm rolled in, bringing freezing rain and high winds. Most candidates huddled in their shelters, survival suits keeping them alive while they conserved energy and waited for the weather to pass. The humans had built a shelter from rocks and salvaged materials in their chosen outcropping. They had a fire going somehow despite the wet conditions. Through the driving rain, other candidates could see them sitting around the flames, actually talking and laughing. "This reminds me of that camping trip in Scotland," Grace said, warming her hands by the fire. "Remember, Thomas? When that storm came through and we had to stay in the tent for 2 days straight." Thomas nodded, checking their water supply. "Different from Alaska, though. That was colder but drier. This is more like the Pacific Northwest." Jack was cooking something over the fire, having identified edible plants near their shelter. "At least we are not in a desert. Give me cold and wet over hot and dry any day." On day 3, the gravity increased and the atmospheric oxygen dropped. Several candidates struggled to move, their bodies fighting against the double stress. Emergency buttons were pressed. 2 more students were extracted from the simulation, unable to continue. The humans adjusted their breathing patterns, slowed their movements slightly, and continued as if nothing major had changed. On day 4, they encountered other candidates struggling with the thin atmosphere. A young Zentarii was sitting against a rock, her crystalline structure flickering weakly. Her oxygen equipment had malfunctioned, and she was slowly suffocating. Grace reached her first. "Thomas, help me build a better shelter here. We need to get the wind off her." "Jack, see if you can fix her equipment or rig something from our supplies." They worked together smoothly, efficiently, like they had done this 1,000 times before. Within an hour, the Zentarii's oxygen was flowing again, and she was recovering in an improved shelter that blocked the harsh wind. "Why help me?" she asked weakly. "This is a competition." Thomas looked genuinely confused by the question. Because you needed help. That is reason enough. This pattern repeated throughout the week. The humans spent as much time helping other candidates as they did managing their own survival. They shared their fire-building techniques. They showed others how to identify water sources. They taught emergency shelter construction using minimal materials. By day 7, when the simulation finally ended, all remaining candidates had passed, largely because the humans had turned a brutal individual test into a cooperative effort. At the graduation ceremony, Veldar stood before the successful candidates with something approaching pride. You have all demonstrated remarkable resilience, adaptability, and strength. You are now certified for extreme environment operations throughout Concordant space. He pulled up the final scores on the display screen. The humans had achieved perfect marks across every single module. Not just passing scores. Perfect scores. Something that had never happened in the 300-year history of the Crucible. However, Veldar continued, I must add special recognition for candidates Thomas Blake, Grace Palmer, and Jack Morrison. Not only did they excel personally, but they elevated everyone's performance through cooperation and instruction. Jacor stepped forward without being called, something unprecedented in Krilt culture. He turned to face the humans and in front of everyone, he performed the Krilt bow of deepest respect, lowering all 4 arms in acknowledgement of superior warriors. You are terrifying creatures from a nightmare world, he said, his translator capturing every word. But you are honorable. You are strong. You are worthy. I would stand beside you in any battle, against any enemy. Thomas gripped his hand firmly, the gesture now familiar between them. The honor is ours, friend Jacor. Other candidates began coming forward, expressing their own gratitude and respect. The soft-looking humans from the unknown planet had changed everyone's understanding of what strength really meant. That evening, Veldar submitted his final report to the Concordant Central Command. It was the longest report he had ever written, and it included recommendations that would change policy across the galaxy. Earth confirmed as Class 12 Death World. Humans demonstrate survival capabilities far exceeding Concordant standards. Recommend immediate policy changes. 1. Human survival techniques to be studied and integrated into all training programs. 2. Humans to be considered for high-risk exploration and first contact missions. 3. Future training courses to include humans as assistant instructors. 4. Extreme caution advised for any species considering conflict with humanity. They are significantly more dangerous than physical appearance suggests. He paused, then added one final line. It is my professional opinion that humans did not conquer their world. Their world conquered them, forged them, and made them into something the galaxy has never seen before. We should be very glad they are allies. 3 months later, the next training group arrived at the Crucible. It included 5 more humans. The returning candidates, now working as junior instructors, immediately gathered the new students for an unofficial briefing. Listen carefully, Jacor told them, his 4 arms crossed seriously. If a human offers to share their food, politely decline unless you have their constitution. If a human says something is fun, prepare for what you would call a survival emergency. And if a human says conditions are harsh, evacuate immediately, because you are probably about to die. A young candidate from a light-gravity world raised a tentative hand. But they look so harmless, so soft. Are they really that dangerous? Sachlik, now a certified xenobiologist, clicked her mandibles in the pattern that meant serious warning. That is exactly what we all thought. Then we learned about Deathworld Earth, where everything tries to kill you and the planet itself is actively hostile. Let me tell you what I have learned about human biology, and why you should never, ever underestimate them. And as the new students listened with growing horror and fascination, the 3 human graduates sat together in the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars and wondering which impossible world they would explore next. Because for humans, impossible was just another word for interesting.